What if the one thing a lonely cowboy never dared to hope for finally arrived on Christmas Eve? Montana Territory, 1885. Snow covered the small town of Pine Creek in a clean white blanket. The storm had rolled in fast and quiet, turning the whole world still. Colton Evers stood outside the mercantile with cold breath drifting from his mouth as he pulled his worn gloves tighter. He was only 25, but he carried the look of a man who had lived twice that long. "Another Christmas alone," he said under his breath. 3 years running the Circle E Ranch by himself had taught him how to survive. But it had also taught him how empty survival could feel. His father always said a man needed nothing but his 2 hands and a good horse, and Colton had believed it. Until the winters grew too long. Until the nights grew too quiet. He stepped off the porch and crossed the snowy street toward the saloon. Christmas cheer wasn't something he cared about, but the warmth inside and a glass of whiskey would take the edge off the hollow feeling in his chest. Inside, the saloon was dim and quiet. A few men sat at tables. Pine branches hung on the walls, trying to make the place look festive. Colton nodded toward Sheriff Miller, then ordered a drink at the bar. "Merry Christmas, Colton," the barkeep said. "Same to you," he answered, though it felt more like a lie than a greeting. He had just lifted the glass when the saloon doors banged open. A cold wind swept in, making everyone look up. "What in the world?" Pete the barkeep muttered. Colton turned to the window. Outside, he heard the sound of hooves and wheels crunching through the heavy snow. No stagecoach was supposed to come through until after Christmas. The mountain pass was dangerous this time of year. But there it was, rolling slowly down the street. Colton set his glass down and moved closer, wiping frost from the glass. 2 people sat inside the coach, an older man and beside him a young woman. Even through the fogged window, Colton could tell she did not belong to this rugged land. Her cloak was fine, her posture straight, her face half hidden behind a fur-lined hood. When she stepped out of the coach, he saw her more clearly. Her hair, golden like summer wheat, slipped from her hood. Snowflakes clung to her lashes as she looked around the town with quiet wonder instead of fear. Colton felt something tighten in his chest, a feeling he had not felt in years. Maybe ever. "You know them?" the sheriff asked, stepping beside him. "No," Colton said. Just surprised anyone would cross the pass now. He didn't like how long he stood there, staring. So he turned back to the bar, knocked back his whiskey, and pulled on his coat. Newcomers came and went. This girl would be the same. Too delicate for a winter like this. Too bright for a place that swallowed dreams whole. He headed back toward the ranch, convincing himself she was none of his business. Across the street, Lucia Reynolds stepped into the modest hotel lobby, her breath still shaky from the cold. She had begged her uncle for months to let her join him on this business trip west. Fresh air, the doctor had said, would help her cough. But Lucia had wanted more than that. She wanted to feel alive again. She wanted something real. And now, standing in a frontier town covered in snow, she felt that spark for the first time. "Only a few days," her uncle said, signing the hotel register. "Then we head back east." Lucia nodded politely, but her eyes drifted toward the window, to the street where the tall cowboy had just walked away. Something about him drew her attention in a way she didn't understand. Upstairs, she unpacked and changed into warmer clothes. From her window, she could see the saloon. When the cowboy stepped outside and untied a stunning chestnut horse, Lucia's breath caught. He moved with a quiet strength, every motion sure and steady. Even from a distance, he looked like someone who carried heavy burdens, someone who had learned to live without expecting kindness from the world. As he mounted his horse, he glanced up at the hotel. Lucia stepped back even though she knew he couldn't see her. She hugged her arms around herself. She didn't know why her heart beat a little faster. She didn't know why she wished he would look again. She only knew she had come west, searching for something. And suddenly she wondered if she had just found it. Christmas morning came cold and bright. Colton was in his barn tending to the horses when a sharp knock sounded on his cabin door. Sheriff Miller stood outside, breath fogging in the air. "Colton!" the sheriff said. "I need your help. The stage driver's taken ill. One of the passengers, a big timberman from the east, needs to see land north of here. He asked for you by name." "On Christmas?" Colton asked. "He's paying good money." Colton almost refused. He didn't want trouble. He didn't want company. But money for the ranch was money he needed. "Fine," he said. "I'll go." As he saddled his horse, he tried not to wonder whether the golden-haired woman would be there. It didn't matter. She would leave soon for her comfortable world back east. She had no reason to notice a man like him. But when Colton reached the hotel, he saw her at once. Lucia Reynolds stood beside her uncle, cheeks pink from the morning cold, and when her eyes met his, something warm flickered between them. "Miss Reynolds," her uncle said, "this is our guide, Mr. Evers." Colton tipped his hat. "Ma'am," she smiled, small but kind. "Thank you for helping us on Christmas Day." Colton swallowed hard. Something shifted inside him, soft and unfamiliar. He didn't know it yet. But this Christmas would change everything. The cold bit harder as Colton led the small group out of Pine Creek. Snow weighed down the tall pines, and every hoofstep crunched loud in the quiet morning. Lucia rode behind him on a gentle mare. Wrapped in borrowed clothes meant more for survival than appearance. Even so, she looked steady in the saddle. Colton tried to focus on the trail ahead, but he found himself glancing back at her more times than he wanted to admit. Each time she seemed to be taking in the land with wide eyes, as if the cold didn't bother her, as if she belonged out here more than any Eastern lady ever should have. Another hour. Colton called out when her uncle asked how far they had left, but his eyes kept drifting to Lucia. She met his gaze once, and her smile warmed him faster than any fire. When they reached a bend in the trail, the trees opened up and revealed the frozen valley below. Snow sparkled in every direction. Pine Creek sat like a small dot against the white land. Lucia pulled her horse to a stop, staring out with wonder. "It's beautiful," she whispered. Her voice was soft, but in the quiet of the mountains, it carried. Colton turned toward her. "Most folks from the east find it too empty." "Not me," she said. "It feels honest." Her uncle cleared his throat. "Progress is coming to this place. These forests will build cities one day." Colton's jaw tightened. He didn't say anything, but Lucia noticed. She saw the way his shoulders stiffened, how his eyes turned back toward the trees like they were something to protect. They rode on until the trail narrowed. Snow deepened. Lucia surprised him by keeping pace without complaint. She rode well, moving naturally with the horse even when the path grew steep. He hadn't expected that. She urged her mare up beside him. "Is the ranch far from here?" "Circle E?" he asked. 5 miles southwest of town." "And you run it alone," she said gently. Colton nodded, his voice steady. "It's the way of things out here." Lucia studied his face. "But is it enough? Just surviving?" The question hit too close. He didn't answer. Instead, he pointed ahead toward thicker woods. "We're close." By the time they reached the timber stand, the sun hung low, turning the snow gold. Her uncle climbed down, excited. "This is more than I hoped for," he said, moving through the trees. Lucia wandered a short distance away, drawn to a clearing where snow lay untouched. Everything was quiet. The pines stood like tall guardians. She tilted her head back and breathed in the cold air. Colton watched her. She looked peaceful standing among the trees, as if they welcomed her, as if she belonged to this land the way he did. When she saw him, she smiled. "It's so quiet," she said. "Most Easterners don't like the silence." "I think it's perfect." Colton didn't know why her words stirred him. Maybe because no one else understood why he stayed out here alone. Maybe because her voice held no judgment, only wonder. He stepped closer. "Your uncle is taking notes. He asked me to check on you." "Well," she said playfully, "I'm quite safe, Mr. Evers." A quiet laugh escaped him before he could stop it. Then a crack shattered the stillness. The ground trembled. Colton reacted fast. He grabbed her arm and pulled her back. "Avalanche," he said, voice sharp with urgency. "We need to move." Snow roared down a distant slope. Her uncle shouted her name. They rushed back toward the horses as the echoes rolled across the mountains. "The trail back's cut off," Colton said after a quick look at the land. "Another slide could come. We can't go that way." "Then where?" her uncle asked, voice rising. "There's a line cabin east of here, 3 miles. It'll shelter us for the night." Her uncle hesitated. "On Christmas?" "It's that, or risk the pass," Colton said firmly. Lucia didn't hesitate. "We'll follow you, Mr. Evers." The ride to the cabin was slow. Snow deepened as they climbed, and cold crept through her clothes. Finally, the small log cabin came into view, smoke-blackened chimney and all. A safe haven in a dangerous land. Colton tended the horses first, working with steady skill. Lucia helped by filling the trough with snow, doing the work without complaint. He watched her quietly. "You adapt well," he said at last. She smiled. "I've never been good at being a proper lady." "Out here," he said, almost smiling, "that might be a blessing." Inside the cabin, he built a fire fast. The room warmed quickly. Her uncle sat in a chair, sighing dramatically, but Lucia walked to the hearth and warmed her hands. "It's simple," she said, looking around, "but it feels safe." "It'll keep us alive," Colton answered, which said everything about the life he lived. They ate a simple meal, hardtack, salt pork, coffee. Her uncle's snores soon filled the small space. Outside, the wind howled, pushing snow hard against the cabin walls. Lucia sat near the fire while Colton stood looking out the window into the darkness. "What would you be doing tonight if you weren't here?" she asked softly. "Reading," he said, "or tending chores. Christmas doesn't mean much when you're alone." Her heart ached for him. "It doesn't have to be lonely to matter," she whispered. He turned. Firelight warmed one side of his face. The other was shadow, like he stood between 2 worlds. She hesitated, then said, "Call me Lucia." He looked surprised. Then something softened in him. "All right," he said quietly. "Lucia." Her name in his voice felt like a gift. "And I should call you Colton," she added. He nodded slowly. They watched each other, fire crackling between them. The storm raged outside, but the cabin felt warm. Close. Alive. "Why do you choose to be alone?" she asked gently. Colton hesitated, then spoke the truth. "My father believed attachments were a weakness. And when he died, I kept living like he told me. Alone is safe out here." "But safe," she said, "isn't the same as living." For a moment, he let her see a crack in the walls he carried. But just as quickly, he pulled back. "You should rest," he said, stepping away. She knew the conversation was over for now, but something had shifted. As Lucia lay on the cabin bed under thick furs, she listened to the wind and watched Colton sitting by the fire. His face glowed in the warm light. Strong, quiet, alone. She wondered what it would take to show him that life could be more than survival, and why she suddenly wanted so much to be the one to show him. Dawn came cold and bright over the mountains. Colton had been awake for hours. He moved quietly around the cabin, adding wood to the fire and warming coffee over the flames. Edward Reynolds still slept in his chair, but when Colton stepped outside, he found Lucia already standing on the small porch, wrapped in a fur robe, watching the sunrise. Soft colors spread across the snow, painting the world in pink and gold. Lucia turned toward him with a peaceful smile. "I couldn't sleep," she said. "I didn't want to miss this." Her cheeks were pink from the cold. The robe framed her golden hair like she had stepped out of some winter dream. Colton looked away for a moment, trying to steady himself. "Coffee's ready," he said. "We should ride out once your uncle wakes." Lucia nodded, but her eyes stayed on him. "Colton, do you ever think of leaving this place? Going somewhere life might be easier?" He shook his head. "This land is all I know. It's in my blood." She stepped closer. "Or maybe you stay because you're afraid to want more." Before he could respond, the cabin door opened and Edward stumbled out, rubbing sleep from his eyes. The moment broke, but the question stayed with Colton. They rode out once the sun was fully up. The avalanche trail had settled overnight, and though the path back had changed, Colton found a safe way down. Lucia followed closely, sitting tall in the saddle, her borrowed coat flapping in the breeze. He watched her quietly, unable to ignore the way she blended into the land more easily than he expected. By mid-afternoon, they reached Pine Creek. Her uncle thanked Colton, promised his payment, and stepped inside the hotel. Lucia dismounted slowly. When she handed him the reins, their hands brushed. Colton froze at the warmth of her touch. "Thank you for everything," she said softly. "For keeping us safe." He wanted to say something meaningful, something he had never said to any woman, but the words wouldn't come. "You're welcome," he managed. She took a step away, but he called her name before he could stop himself. "Lucia." She turned back, hope flickering in her eyes. "If you want," he said carefully, "I could show you more of the territory, places most folks never see." Her smile lit up her whole face. "I would like that very much." And with that, she disappeared into the hotel, leaving Colton standing there with a storm of feelings he didn't know how to name. The next morning, Lucia received a message. A young boy delivered it nervously. "Mr. Evers says if you still want to ride today, he'll be waiting at 10. Lucia's heart skipped. She thanked the boy, dressed warmly, and stepped outside exactly on time. There he was, clean shirt, pressed hat, fresh shave, the same quiet strength, but something gentler in his eyes today. "I wasn't sure you'd come," he said. "I said I would," she replied simply. They rode into the foothills. Colton showed her hidden paths, old game trails, and land so untouched it felt sacred. They stopped at a half-frozen stream to water the horses. "You love this place," Lucia said softly. Colton looked up, surprised she saw through him so easily. "It's my home," he said. "It's more than that," she said. "It's part of you." For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Something warm stirred between them. They climbed higher until the trail opened into a hidden valley. Snow melted in small patches where sun touched the ground. A spring-fed pond sparkled like glass. Wildflowers pushed through the frost, stubborn and bright. Lucia gasped. "It's beautiful." "My mother brought me here when I was young," Colton said quietly. "It was her favorite place." Lucia touched his arm gently. "Thank you for bringing me here." They ate lunch on a blanket beside the pond, talking about life in the East and life in the West. When Lucia asked why his mother died, he told her softly. When she asked why he stayed alone, he didn't have an answer. "You built walls," she said gently, "high ones." He swallowed hard. "They kept me alive." "But maybe it's time to live," she whispered. He looked at her then, really looked, and something inside him shifted. They rode back quietly. When they reached the hotel, she stepped down from her horse, and their hands brushed again. "Thank you for today," she said, but the way she said it meant something more. That night, Colton found himself riding back into town. He told himself he just needed to collect his payment, but he knew better. Lucia stood on the hotel porch, wrapped in a shawl, watching the falling snow. "I was thinking about you," she confessed gently. Inside, in the firelit sitting room, they spoke in low voices. The room felt warm, close, meant for truths. "I don't want to go back," she said at last. "Not yet. Maybe not ever." Colton's breath caught. "You barely know the West," he said. "It's harsh. It takes more than it gives." Quote. "And yet," she said softly, "I've never felt more alive." He tried to step away. He tried to protect her from the life he had lived. But she stepped closer. "When you look at me, Colton," she whispered, "you see what could be. Don't run from that." He didn't answer. He couldn't. Not with her standing so close. Then the door opened. Her uncle returned. The moment shattered. Colton accepted his payment, exchanged polite words, and left. But he looked back at Lucia, and she looked back at him. Nothing was finished. The next morning, the stagecoach waited to take Lucia home. Snow drifted down softly as townsfolk gathered to watch. Colton rode into town fast, heart pounding. When he saw Lucia step from the hotel, something inside him cracked open. Their eyes met across the street. She walked straight toward him. "You came," she whispered. "I couldn't let you leave without telling you." He hesitated. "You changed something in me, Lucia." She took his hand. "I made my choice, Colton. I'm not leaving." Her uncle confirmed it. She would stay, find work, build a life here. And then, in front of the entire town, Colton took her hands and finally spoke the truth. "Lucia Reynolds," he said softly, "I want a life with you, if you'll have me." Her smile broke open like dawn. "That's all I ever wanted." The stage left without her. The town buzzed. Colton offered her his arm. "Shall we begin?" he asked. 3 months later, spring arrived. Lucia tended a small garden beside the Circle E cabin while dinner baked inside. Colton returned from town with news. The wedding was set for Saturday. Lucia's parents were coming from Philadelphia to witness it. She laughed and cried and held Colton close on the porch as the sun dipped behind the mountains. "Do you ever regret staying?" he asked quietly. She turned toward him, her smile soft and sure. "Never. This is where my heart lives now. With you." Their kiss held every promise a lonely cowboy once thought he'd never have. A home, a partner, a future. And as the first star appeared in the sky, Colton held the woman who changed everything. The woman who rode into town and made his Christmas wish come true.